to describe the early relationship that the Sussexes had with the media and the public as anything less than an intense love affair would be an understatement. They were the rock stars of the decade, the it couple. And then, just like that, it all suddenly came crashing down. Or at least that's what it would seem like to the casual observer. Because in reality, the end of the Sussex love affair and the Sussexes' reputation and goodwill was a slow death. A death by 1,000 cuts, with each and every one of these cuts being self-inflicted. But how did they go from being on top of the world to becoming the laughingstock of the world, and in the space of a mere few years? As with all stories, good or bad, there is always a beginning. And as with bad stories, there are always early warning signs. The 8th of November, 2016, Prince Harry's then press secretary, Jason Kanoff, releases on behalf of Prince Harry a scathing statement against the media and the public, accusing them of racism and harassment of the then relatively unknown Meghan Markle. This statement was unprecedented in nature, and according to former palace staffers, was a result of blackmail from Meghan. So she gave Harry an ultimatum of, you either release this statement to formally confirm that I am indeed your girlfriend, or we're done. Which, if true, would explain why the wording was so scathing. It was probably Harry's desperation seeping through, or it was probably drafted by Meghan altogether, or if not that, then at least revised by her, edited by her back and forth before she gave her approval for release. From all the reading I've done, it was clear Meghan had her claws right in Harry from the very beginning. Now, considering that Meghan at the time, as I mentioned, was relatively unknown, the statement did raise more than a few eyebrows. At the time of the release of the statement, the relationship had only been made public for a week. So was a week really a sufficient amount of time for such alleged hateful attacks to become so out of control as to warrant such an uncharacteristically scathing statement from the otherwise silent palace? And about a brand new girlfriend to boot. You know, this wasn't a fiance, this wasn't a wife, this wasn't a long-term girlfriend. It had been less than 6 months at the time. And when you consider the media coverage at the time, there really wasn't much of anything circulating about Meghan, especially negative articles, other than this standout, notorious article that Meghan keeps going back to time and time again, because quite frankly, it was all she had. So knowing what we now know about Meghan's fragile, overinflated ego, and especially taking note of the date of publication of the article, which was only 6 days before the palace released the statement, I would venture to say that this singular article was all it took for Meghan to feel besieged by the public, under attack, bullied, harassed, etc. And while there may have been a few negative comments being made about her on social media at the time, anyone in the public eye invites negative scrutiny, including really small content creators like myself. But instead of keep to herself and keep a low profile, Meghan continued to bait the media and invite that attention and scrutiny. And this was all done in the months after the release of the statement, when her profile began to climb as a result of that statement, which, you know, you can connect the dots what the true intention behind that statement was. But I think we can all agree that it was all very odd behavior for someone who was apparently feeling tormented by all the coverage. That one article pushed her to the brink, and I don't doubt that she was scouring the internet as early as 2016 to find negative comments and send them to Harry. But this really highlights the central issue that led eventually to their demise, which is their failure to understand that not everyone is going to like you. And that was a reality that Meghan and Harry refused to accept. The 27th of November 2017, the long-awaited engagement announcement and the beginning of Harry and Meghan mania.
What are you here?
Just to see Meghan. That's it.
They were the golden couple, and they relished every moment of it. If Harry was indeed struggling with PTSD at the mere sound of clicking cameras, well, there was absolutely no hint of that. And if Meghan was struggling with her newfound fame and all the attention and scrutiny, there was really no hint of that either. In hindsight, it really serves to prove how the couple never had a problem with media attention per se. They had a problem with being criticized. In the lead up to the wedding, and even during the big day, the love affair with Meghan and Harry persisted, and they could do no wrong. And even when they did, when we got hints of some tension between Meghan and Catherine, for example, the public was quick to forgive them and just pass off their antics as just pre-wedding jitters and stress. And that forgiveness and tolerance extended to everything between tiara tantrums and ghosting her entire family. All the warnings that were made by her father and her half-siblings remained unheeded and were cast aside as the ramblings of bitter, jealous, fame-hungry backstabbers of their own kin. Which is interesting now, considering the current situation where pretty much most of the public sides with the Markles and now understand that they were doing nothing but telling us the truth. Despite the family drama in the lead up to the wedding, on the 19th of May 2018, billions tuned in to watch what Meghan and Harry would later describe as a spectacle for the public. And millions rejoiced in the streets of England, celebrating the union of the newly minted Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Even the strange scene of Meghan walking herself halfway down the aisle and the notable absence of anyone from either side of her family save for her mother seemed to be swept under the rug. And thus, the couple rode off in a fairy tale-like manner towards their happily ever after. Or so we thought. The high from the couple's wedding lasted into the weeks and months succeeding it. Initially, Meghan seemed to fit right in with her newly polished appearance and the happy photographs of the royal family that were released every now and then. However, as time flew by, it was clear that there was a shift taking place in that entire dynamic. It can be very easy to start blurring the lines between Meghan's changed behavior since the wedding and the trajectory that eventually led to Megxit. And that's because they're both inextricably intertwined. Although, for this video, I do want to steer clear of focusing on Meghan's behavior specifically, because we have more than enough content to make a separate video just focusing on that. To us as the public, especially in 2018, not much seemed different. Meghan was still thriving in her role as this feminist groundbreaker who represented the future of the British monarchy. And Harry, well, he sort of took a back seat once the marriage was secured, and that's pretty much where he stayed ever since. The couple embarked on multiple successful tours, such as the Australia tour, where they announced their first pregnancy and everyone was so in love with them. And despite all of this positive publicity that they were drowning in, they still chose to spend every night, according to Tom Bauer, scrolling through the internet, scouring, looking for anything negative to fixate upon. But somehow in the midst of all that, they also seemed to understand their growing power and influence over the public, which really got to their heads. It was Diana 2.0, as Harry would later describe Meghan during the Oprah interview and also during Netflix. He would have us all believe that the palace was threatened by her. It was also during that pivotal trip that revelations about Meghan's alleged bullying of her staff really started to take hold at the palace and started to be raised as legitimate concerns. Now, this was all done behind Meghan and Harry's back, and it ultimately led to the deteriorating relationship with Jason Kanoff, who ended up quitting not long after, and with the splitting of the Sussex and Cambridge offices. So they used to be the one office under Kensington Palace, but that was no more after these bullying concerns were raised. Now, this separation of offices didn't go unnoticed by the media and the public. And it served as the first real sign that not all was well with the Fab Four. And yet, that announcement did nothing to dampen the public's appetite for all things Sussex, as evidenced by the announcement of their brand new Instagram account at the time, Sussex Royal, which managed to amass over 300,000 new followers in mere seconds, eventually growing to the millions. Although, unlike the public, the press was already picking up on some questionable behavior, such as the refusal to have a traditional royal birth and the concealment of Archie's birth altogether, to the point where the palace itself made an embarrassing gaffe, announcing that Meghan had gone into labor when she'd actually given birth hours prior. Then there was the refusal to share photos of baby Archie at all, unless it was random photos of various parts of Archie, like his foot or his eye, posted on their very heavily curated Instagram page, which had people speculating. Are they doing this to maintain their privacy and shed the traditional ways of old, in the same way that Marie Antoinette didn't want to give birth in front of a bunch of courtiers back in the 1700s and she just wanted to have a private birth? Or was there something more calculated at play here? It was clear that they were already starting to control the narrative and take control of what the press can and cannot post or say about them. But since Megxit, some speculate that this was all a ploy to monetize their children in the future. If there isn't enough supply of images of their children, there'll be a lot more demand for it, and they can make money out of it. Because let's not forget, this is the same woman who allegedly said in Australia, "I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this." Their rampant hypocrisy was also starting to really boil over as time progressed. A chief example is Travelist, described on their Instagram page as a global initiative striving to change the impact of tourism for good. While a seemingly worthy cause on the surface, if you dug just a little bit, then the rancid stench of double standards would just whack you right in the face. This would be the genesis for endless hypocritical ramblings to the public about limiting or even abstaining altogether from getting on a plane and going on holiday, all in an effort to save the environment, while the Sussexes themselves traveled to countless destinations on private jets, all while using their special status as royals that needed protection as justification for this extravagance. Needless to say, the media and the public were not exactly too fond of this hypocritical display, and it only kept getting worse from this point onwards. On to the South African royal tour of 2019. Another royal tour that was expected to be a success, except this time, Meghan and Harry were the architects of its failure. They orchestrated a one-on-one interview with Harry's long-term friend and journalist, Tom Bradby, as part of a documentary called Harry and Meghan, An African Journey. A fitting cover for what the interview or the documentary was really about. Their first public attack against the royal family and the British press and public. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that interview because it's been covered, to no end But if there was ever a sign that these two were going off the rails and heading off into uncharted territory, this was it. The rift between the brothers is finally confirmed by Harry himself, and Meghan puts up what she thinks is her best impersonation of her dead mother-in-law. And to say that the press and the public didn't take too well to one of the most privileged people on the planet complaining about their lot in life in the midst of all that poverty and hardship that they saw firsthand would be a major understatement. But the biggest sign that the couple's role within the monarchy was very quickly coming to an end wasn't known to the press or the public at the time. After their South Africa tour, their diaries were empty. Christmas 2019. Rather than spend the holidays with the royal family, the Sussexes decided to travel to an undisclosed location in Canada under the guise of wanting a normal first Christmas with their son and Meghan's mother, Doria. I'm just gonna say, if they thought that staying at a lavish mansion owned by a Russian billionaire on Vancouver Island for free is normal, well, it wouldn't be the last time we heard of such an outlandishly out-of-touch comment. But it was during this break that the straw that broke the camel's back allegedly took place. Right there in full global viewing during the Queen's annual Christmas message. The very notable absence of a certain Prince Harry and his family from the photo lineup. Whether this was a deliberate snub on the Queen's part or just an innocent display of the direct line of succession, the heirs to the throne, is quite a moot point. And honestly, if it was a snub, well, the Sussexes had it coming. Everything I've discussed in this video so far are things that we as the public knew. Who knows how difficult they made life behind closed doors when they were still within the royal fold. But what matters is, as of that moment, they had apparently decided that enough was enough. Fast forward to the 7th of January 2020, Canada House in London. The couple visit with Canada's High Commissioner to express their thanks and gratitude for being so warmly welcomed and taken care of during their 6-week stay in Canada. Which is funny, considering that the entire moving to Canada thing was a front to cover up the real intentions of moving to the land of the free and, let's not forget, the paparazzi. But little did the world know that behind all those pleasantries and smiles was an announcement to be released 24 hours later that would take the entire world, including the palace, by storm. I'm gonna leave it there for this video. Do join me next week for part 2, where we'll pick up right where we left off and have a look at the utter destruction that ensued ever since Megxit. That's it, part 1 is over. I'm gonna go now. I suck at saying goodbye.